Hi and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. I'm going to tell you a story about a void. For years, it was a quiet, aching space at the center of our marriage, a dream we shared that was consistently denied to us. We decided to fill that void, to pour everything we had, our love, our hope, and every last penny of our shared history, into one final, beautiful act of creation. We were going to build a family. The price was our entire world, a sacrifice I made with a joyful, hopeful heart, believing I was investing in a future filled with laughter and love. I had no idea that the void was not a shared space of grief, but a meticulously designed trap. I had no idea that she wasn't trying to fill it. She was using its sacred, empty space as the perfect cover for the most complete and devastating betrayal imaginable. The silence in our home was a language we had both become fluent in. It was the silence of an empty nursery, the silence of a future that felt just out of reach. We had tried for years, a grueling, soul-crushing marathon of hope and disappointment that had left us emotionally scarred and financially drained. We were good people, we had a good life, a home filled with love. But the one thing we wanted more than anything, the thing that felt like the entire purpose of the love we had built, was a child. It was the central, unanswered question of our lives. We had reached the end of that road, broken and exhausted. And then she brought me a new map. It was for a different journey, a different kind of hope, international adoption. She presented it to me one evening, her eyes shining with a light I hadn't seen in years. She had found a private agency, a small, specialized group that worked with an orphanage in a small, Eastern European country. She had done the research. She showed me the website, a simple, professional-looking page filled with pictures of smiling, healthy children and testimonials from tearfully grateful families. She had already spoken to them, she said. They were kind, they were encouraging, and they believed we were perfect candidates. The hope that bloomed in my chest was so powerful it was a physical thing. It was a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. It was the first real, tangible possibility of an answer to the question that had haunted us for a decade. And I grabbed onto it with both hands. There was, of course, a significant hurdle, the cost. The agency fees, the legal costs, the travel, the facilitator payments. It was a mountain of money, a sum so large it was terrifying. It was, essentially, everything we had. Our life savings, the equity in our home, our retirement accounts. To do this, we would have to liquidate our entire past to pay for our future. I looked across the table at her, at the desperate hope in her eyes, and I didn't hesitate for a single second. What was money compared to this? What was a house? They were just things. A family, a child to love, that was everything. I saw her as my hero. In my own grief and exhaustion, I had started to give up, but she had found us a way forward. She was the one with the strength, the resilience to keep fighting for our dream. I entrusted the entire process to her. She was the project manager of our future family. She handled the paperwork, the emails, the phone calls. She was our sole point of contact with the agency. My role was simple: to provide the resources. I became a machine of liquidation. I cashed out my 401k, a decision that felt not reckless but righteous. I took out a second mortgage on our home, signing the papers with a steady, hopeful hand. I sold my father's classic car, a piece of my own history that I gladly sacrificed for the new history we were about to create. Every dollar I handed over to her to deposit into the agency account felt like a brick in the foundation of our new life. The process, as she relayed it to me, was a series of bureaucratic hurdles and emotional triumphs. There were moments of frustration, a lost document, a government delay, and moments of pure joy like the day she told me, her voice choked with happy tears, that our initial application had been approved. We were on our way. We spent our evenings looking at pictures of the orphanage, talking about the child we didn't yet know but already loved with a fierce, protective passion. We chose a name. We painted the spare room in a soft, gentle yellow. The silence in our home was finally being filled, not with noise, but with the quiet, powerful hum of a dream that was finally coming true. We were a team, united in this single sacred purpose. I was the provider, the enabler. She was the leader, the tireless warrior fighting on the front lines of bureaucracy to bring our child home. My love and admiration for her had never been deeper. I saw her as a paragon of strength and dedication. I had given her my complete, unconditional trust, the kind of faith a man only gives to the person he believes is the other half of his own soul. I had no idea I was not her partner. I was simply the primary investor in her masterpiece of deception. The months that followed were a masterclass in the art of waiting. Our lives were in a state of suspended animation, every decision, every conversation, orbiting around the single, momentous event we believed was just over the horizon. The updates came from her, little parcels of hope delivered over the dinner table or in a hurried, excited phone call. She would tell me of her conversations with the agency, of the progress they were making. She spoke of the people on the other end of the line as if they were old friends, the kind but firm case manager, the gruff but efficient overseas lawyer. She painted a vivid picture of a team of dedicated professionals working tirelessly on our behalf, and I believed every word. My admiration for her grew with each passing day. She was a warrior. She would spend hours locked in her home office, on the phone, typing emails, handling the paperwork. I would hear the frustration in her voice as she navigated some new bureaucratic snag, and I would see the triumphant relief on her face when she resolved it. I felt a pang of guilt for my own passive role in the process, but whenever I offered to help to take on some of the burden, she would gently refuse. "You're doing your part, my love," she would say, touching my face with a look of profound, weary love. "You're providing the means. Let me fight the battles. I know these people. I know the system. Just trust me." And I did. To question her would have felt like a betrayal, a lack of faith in the very dream we were chasing. Her stress, her secrecy with her laptop, her occasional vague answers to my specific questions. I rationalized it all. She was carrying an immense burden, a burden I could barely comprehend. Her occasional irritability or distraction was just a symptom of the immense pressure she was under. She was fighting for our family, and I owed her my patience and my unwavering support. The process was, as she had warned me, more expensive than we had initially budgeted. There were always new, unexpected costs: a government expediting fee, a required donation to the orphanage, a translator's retainer. Each new expense required a fresh sacrifice. I sold my father's watch collection. I borrowed money from my brother, a humiliating but necessary act. With each new payment, I felt the sickening lurch of our financial precarity, but it was always immediately replaced by the thrill of being one step closer. She would present these new costs to me with a look of pained apology, as if she were personally responsible for the endless demands. "I'm so sorry," she would say. "I know this is hard, but they told me this is the final one. This is the last hurdle. After this, it's just a matter of waiting for the court date." We were so close. We had given everything. We had poured our entire world into this single, beautiful vessel of hope. The final update came on a Friday afternoon. She called me at work, her voice a choked, breathless sob. My heart plummeted. I braced myself for bad news. "We got it," she wept into the phone. "We got the date. The final hearing is in 2 weeks. They've assigned us a child, a little boy. It's happening." Oh my God, it's finally happening. The relief, the joy, was an explosion in my chest, a supernova of emotion that left me breathless and shaking. I left work early. I came home and I found her in the newly painted nursery, holding a small, stuffed teddy bear, her face awash with tears of pure, unadulterated happiness. We held each other in that quiet, yellow room, and we cried together, the shared tears of two people whose most profound, most desperate prayer had finally been answered. The years of pain, the heartbreak, the sacrifice, it had all been worth it. We were going to be a family. In 2 weeks, our son would be coming home. The silence in our house was finally, definitively broken. It was replaced by the beautiful, triumphant music of a dream realized. I looked at her, my beautiful, strong, resilient wife, the woman who had fought so hard, who had carried us across the finish line through her sheer force of will, and I felt a love so profound it was almost painful. She was my hero, my savior, the architect of my happiness. I was the luckiest man in the world. The final 2 weeks were a blur of joyful, frantic preparation. We bought a crib, a car seat, tiny clothes that felt impossibly small and soft in my large, clumsy hands. We were not just a couple anymore. We were a family on the verge of its own creation. The house was filled with a light and an energy it had not known for years. The dream was no longer an abstract hope. It was a tangible reality, scheduled to arrive on a specific date on a specific flight. The day before we were supposed to leave for the final hearing, she told me there was one last, small piece of paperwork she needed to print from the agency's secure online portal. She was in her office, and I was in the kitchen packing snacks for the flight. I heard a small, sharp cry of frustration from her office. I walked in to find her staring at her laptop, her face pale with panic. "I can't get in," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "The website is down. The whole portal is offline. I need to print the final travel authorization." I felt a familiar prickle of unease, but I pushed it down. A technical glitch, it was nothing. "Just call them," I said, my voice calm and reassuring. "Call our case manager. She'll email it to you." She nodded, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her phone. I watched as she scrolled through her contacts. I saw her press the name. I heard the phone ring once, twice, 3 times, and then I heard the recorded robotic voice of the phone company. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected." The silence that followed was a physical thing, a cold, heavy presence that instantly suffocated the joyful energy that had filled our home. The blood drained from my face. "Try the main number for the agency," I said, my voice strained. She did. The same result. Disconnected. "It's fine," she said, her own voice a high, thin wire of forced calm. "It's a temporary issue, a server problem. It will be back online in an hour." But I could see the terror in her eyes, a terror that mirrored my own. I went to my own computer. I would find the agency myself. I would find a different number, an email address, anything. I typed the name of the agency into the search engine, the name that had been the center of our universe for the past year. The search results came back. A few paid ads for other adoption agencies. A few news articles about international adoption in general. But the website, the simple, professional page that had been our lifeline, was gone. Not just down, it was gone. The domain was for sale. It was as if the agency had simply ceased to exist. My mind was reeling, refusing to accept the implications. There had to be an explanation. They had been hacked. They had been shut down by a foreign government. It was a mistake, a terrible, catastrophic mistake. I looked at her. She was sitting at her desk, her head in her hands, her body shaking with what I thought were sobs of grief and fear. My own heartbreak was immense, a crushing weight of despair. But my first instinct was to comfort her. She had been the one to carry this, to fight for this. This failure would be a deeper wound for her than it was for me. I put my arms around her and I held her as she wept. The next few days were a blur of grief. Our dream was dead. The child we had named, the child we had loved, was a ghost who would never exist. And we were not just childless, we were ruined. Our home was mortgaged to the hilt, our savings were gone, our retirement was a memory. We had sacrificed everything for a dream that had vanished into thin air. After the initial wave of grief had passed, my mind, in a desperate search for meaning, needed answers. I needed to understand what had happened. I needed to find the people who had done this to us, who had taken our money and our hope and simply disappeared. I needed a target for my rage. I went back to her computer, thinking I could find some old emails, some piece of correspondence with a name, a contact, anything I could use to start my own investigation. She was in the other room, sedated with grief, I thought. I opened her email account. I searched for the agency's name. A few old email chains came up, the ones she had forwarded to me, the ones with the good news about our application being approved. But I needed more. I went into her trash folder, her sent items, looking for anything she might have deleted, and that's when I found it. It wasn't an email from the agency. It was a receipt from a web design company, dated 18 months ago. It was a receipt for the purchase of a small business website template. The name of the template was Hope and Family. The invoice was paid from her personal credit card. I stared at the receipt, my mind struggling to connect the dots, and then I kept digging. I found a folder buried deep in her cloud storage, a folder I had never seen before. It was titled Project. Inside were not letters from an agency, but drafts, Word documents, letterhead templates she had designed herself with the fake agency's logo on it. I saw the different versions of the letters she had received, the ones she had edited and perfected before forwarding them to me. I found the original stock photos from the website, the smiling children, the happy families. I found the audio files, snippets of her own voice, altered with a voice-changing software, practicing the lines of the case manager she had supposedly been speaking to. And in a final, locked folder, a folder that took me an hour to guess the password for, the name we had chosen for our son, I found the bank statements. The statements from the hidden offshore account where all our money, every penny of our liquidated life, had been transferred. There was no agency. There was no orphanage. There was no child. There was only her. It had all been a lie. A single, monolithic, and perfectly executed lie. The most sacred, painful, and beautiful dream of our shared life had been nothing more than a meticulously designed stage for the greatest heist I could have ever imagined. The world did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. I was floating in a silent black void, the glowing screen of her laptop the only star in a universe that had been stripped of all meaning. The woman I had loved, the woman I had just held and comforted in her grief, was not my partner. She was my enemy. She was not a victim. She was the architect of my complete and utter annihilation. The heartbreak was so immense, so total, that it was beyond tears. It was a quiet internal implosion of the soul. I felt my entire past, our entire shared history, being rewritten in this new, horrifying language. Every memory was now tainted. Her joy at my sacrifices was not for our shared dream, but for the success of her con. Her strength was not resilience. It was the cold, hard nerve of a master criminal. Her love was not love. It was the most effective tool in her arsenal. I walked out of her office and into the living room where she was sitting, staring blankly at the wall, the picture of a broken-hearted woman. I did not scream. I did not rage. The emotions were too vast, too profound for such simple expressions. I simply took her laptop and placed it on the coffee table in front of her. I opened the folder. Project, I said, my voice a dead, hollow thing I did not recognize as my own. Tell me about the project. She looked down at the screen, at the irrefutable digital proof of her betrayal laid bare. The mask of the grieving victim fell away. Her face, which had been a portrait of soft, tragic sorrow, hardened into something I had never seen before, a cold, defiant, and utterly remorseless mask of pure contempt. She did not deny it. She did not try to lie. She simply looked up at me, her eyes as cold and empty as the void I was now floating in. It was the only way out, she said, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion. Out of what? I asked, the question feeling absurd, meaningless. Out of this, she said, with a vague wave of her hand that encompassed the room, the house, the entire life I thought we had built together. Out of you. Out of the pathetic, suffocating little dream of a family that you were so obsessed with. That was your dream, not mine. I was trapped in it, trapped by your endless, hopeful, pathetic love. Her words were a series of physical blows. I had seen our dream of a child as the ultimate expression of our shared love. She had seen it as a cage. So you destroyed me, I whispered. You took everything we had, everything I was, and you burned it to the ground. For what? For money. The money isn't the point, she sneered, her voice dripping with a condescension that was more painful than any physical violence could have been. The money is just the tool. It's the means to an end. The point is freedom. A life that isn't defined by your needs, by your quiet, boring, predictable goodness. I wanted a different life, a bigger life. And you, in your infinite, trusting stupidity, you paid for it. I looked at the woman in front of me, and for the first time I saw her. I saw past the character she had played for 15 years, the loving wife, the grieving partner. I saw a creature of profound, bottomless selfishness, a black hole of narcissism that had consumed my entire world. The most devastating part was not the loss of the money. It was the loss of the dream. She had taken the most pure, most beautiful thing I had ever wanted, and she had twisted it into the weapon of my own destruction. She had used my deepest desire as the perfect, unassailable cover for her crime. Who would ever question a woman fighting so desperately to adopt a child? Who would ever suspect such a sacred quest could be a lie? I stood up and walked to the door. I had nothing left to say. There were no arguments to be made, no explanations to be demanded. I had been living in a fiction, and the author had just written the final, brutal chapter. "Where are you going?" she asked, a flicker of something, not concern but perhaps logistical inconvenience in her voice. I turned at the door and looked at her one last time, sitting there amidst the wreckage of our life, a queen on a throne of lies. "I don't know," I said, and it was the truest thing I had ever said. I had no home, no money, no future, no past I could believe in. I was a man who had been completely and utterly erased. I walked out of that house and I did not look back. I was walking away from a lie, but I was walking into nothing. The void she had so expertly used had now swallowed me whole. I was broke, I was heartbroken, and I was completely, utterly alone. The silence that had once filled our home was now the only thing I had left. It was the sound of my own empty life. The legal and financial fallout was a slow, grinding process of humiliation. The money was gone, of course, hidden in offshore accounts my lawyer said were virtually untouchable. The house was foreclosed on. The debt I had taken on from my family was a moral burden I would carry for the rest of my life. She disappeared, a ghost who had vanished as completely as the fictional agency she had created. The legal system could offer me a divorce, but it could not offer me justice. I was left adrift in the wreckage, a man without an anchor. The years that followed were not a story of a dramatic recovery. There was no new love, no sudden financial windfall, no neat and tidy happy ending. There was only the slow, arduous, and deeply unglamorous work of rebuilding a human soul from the ground up. I had to learn to live with the void. Not just the void of the child that never was, but the void left by the woman who never was. I had been in love with a character, a performance, and the grief for that fictional person was a real and profound thing. I found my way back not through some grand gesture, but through small, quiet acts of purpose. I started volunteering. I worked with at-risk kids, kids who had been abandoned or forgotten, kids who lived in the very real institutional orphanages I had once only read about on a fake website. I didn't do it to replace the child I had lost. I did it because their struggles, their resilience, their small, hard-won victories put my own pain in perspective. They taught me that a life is not defined by the dreams you achieve, but by how you choose to live in the face of the dreams that are denied to you. I will never be the man I was, the trusting, hopeful, and slightly naive man who believed in the perfect love story is gone forever, but the man who is left is stronger. He is a man who has looked into the absolute abyss of human betrayal and has found a way to crawl back into the light. My life is not a story about filling a void anymore. It's a story about learning to live with it, about finding a way to let the light in around its edges. The dream of a family that I once had is dead. But the love that fueled that dream was real. It was the best part of me, and that is the one thing she could never truly steal. Thank you for tuning in to Reddit Whispers. We've all faced moments when everything felt broken. What was your turning point? Leave it in the comments because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now.